Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and mihi matariki and kia ora. And I'm so pleased to be here out of a commercial environment which I generally spend most of my life in, and it's great to be in a commercial environment with a difference. I want to begin by actually asking you, without you needing to answer, of course, how did Anne Robinson arrive at this beautiful shape in her head? Certainly she didn't come fresh off the boat to arrive at this beautiful idea. And my presentation today to you is a simple proposition. How much did you contribute to Anne's development, which enabled her to deliver this beautiful, what is currently a $17,000 object? Think about that, because that's where we're going to begin our discussion. I want to really take a very long bow about the topic of branding. You've heard all along these walls and throughout various workshops, I've heard the word Google and analytical material and websites and goodness knows what. And of course, we do all of those sorts of things, and I'll talk to you about that in the workshop in more detail. Plus this forum, online forum we're talking about, where there's lots more detail. You can actually come in on that and talk about that. But I actually want to take a much, much longer bow today. Because in this room today, I put to you that you, the creative industries, can do more for New Zealand than any other industry. As you open your doors each day, this fact probably doesn't occur to you as frequently as it should. Like every business, we can often become obsessed with operating detail as opposed to the cause. People talk about brand identity, but in the end, it's about personality. Much more than a wonderful logo, the distillation of many things. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you communicate? How do you actually do all of these things? What is your appeal? What are you offering me as a member of your audience? What are the values and integrities that underpin it? And are you really a beacon in the community for change, enlightenment, and new thinking? Do you move me forward, or are you simply holding a mirror for me to admire myself as I am? These are the things which will determine your success as creative industry players. But let's go back a long way. Let's talk about a long, long time ago, in fact 410 million years ago, when Gondwanaland started to unravel itself, and by a stroke of luck New Zealand managed to secure and drift off into the Pacific. And so we got the wet bit, which was wonderful. But our counterparts on the other side of the Tasman got the dry bit. And meanwhile, they're still they got lots of minerals, of course, as well, but they got the dry bit. And of course, after all these years, they're still asking, where the bloody hell are we? So we broke off and we drifted in a long way into the Pacific. And this whole drifting process is something that I have been fascinated with for the last few years in terms of what it means to us. But it was much an island prison as an island paradise, in the sense that anybody that came here never had a return ticket. And so we sort of have this unique flora and fauna, this unique way of life here, and I'm very keen to make sure we look after all of those things. And that wonderful communicator, David Bellamy, called it Noah's Ark, which I think is absolutely wonderful in terms of develop this unique, abundant flora and fauna, which is so special to us. Pretty soon, we began this remarkable journey as people. Whoever we are in this room, whatever blood is running in our veins, we have migrated here in some form or another. And so the journey began a long, long time ago in Southeast Asia. Giant double-hulled canoes, heavily laden with families and animals and vital provisions. They headed out on a truly incredible journey, and it took something like 2,000 years. It would cover millions of nautical miles of open sea and become one of mankind's most remarkable journeys. But when I was a child at school, the history books were all about Magellan and all these wonderful people, Columbus, etc., on the other side of the world. Nobody told me about these amazing navigators that actually were the most incredibly talented sailors. And so these navigators were harnessing the wind, reaching out across the vast Pacific hundreds and hundreds of years before these fellows did. And when you look at how they did it and the way in which they navigated, they really were star masters. The ocean-going feats spawned these amazing navigators who had commanded this amazing wealth of knowledge of the natural world and the subtle signals it displayed to aid navigation. The height of their art lay in their stars. Countless painstaking hours were spent memorizing a vast array and constellations from various arrangements of pebbles placed in the sand. The bewildering breadth of star knowledge carried in their heads included the star paths of every pair of islands they were conceivably likely to travel to. and they wrote very little down. They called this constellation of stars that they chose to make a journey their Avea. And I always think that this Avea word is the most beautiful word in the Pacific language. It's the word that says this is the guiding set of stars that have brought us here. And so it's a very appropriate word for this conference. Can you show me my Avea? A group of navigation points to which I can navigate my future life and direction as a New Zealander. In my personal development, as a community, and as a nation, you've invited me to talk to you about branding. And I'm putting up a challenge to you here today, that I believe in the case of your businesses, this is the very topic which should be at the core of your brand strategy. So when you begin to think of a map into the future, as these wonderful navigators made for themselves with their little shells, etc., and you begin to realize that this whole question of navigating this wonderful tiny nation we have has precise observations. We need to know things about ourselves. We need to know things about others, etc. The creative industries have an enormous contribution to make, to show us, to avoid plagiarism, to allow us to be who we are and develop these unique journeys for ourselves. This is what these navigators did a long, long time ago. We need to do it again. So these feats of navigation that brought us here is an amazing, amazing story which is still untold in many people's heads. Many people don't know this. But when you think of this strong, untouched land that for many, many years nobody lived here at all, these Pacific voyagers eventually reached our shores. They found this strange, beautiful, untouched land, isolated by wide oceans for nearly 70 million years. And it was a different world, tangled, fern-filled, preserved ancient plants which have still here today, many of them. There were no land mammals at all, no snakes, and so were the unique ground-dwelling species of birds, some of them very large, of course. Many of you who are historians will know these things, but for me, as a layperson, I'm fascinated by what they do to my soul and my spirit. With a series of ingenious inventions, the new settlers adjusted to the very different conditions which life in a new land had offered them. They acquired a profound knowledge. Meanwhile, the land shaped their thinking, their mythology, their folklore, their poetry, and their art forms. In traditional Maori thought, all things have life and significance, and everything is related to everything else. So we had enormous courage, whether we were Maori or Pākehā, and we came here because we had been disenfranchised perhaps from somewhere else, and now it's a question of where to from here. So the adaptation of the Polynesian peoples, and we are all, in a way, Polynesian, is the most amazing feat of humanity and change on the globe today. If we can continue to evolve at a rapid rate as we have done over those thousands of years, we will be able to interpret a world and live in it in a much smarter and better way. And so there are all sorts of subcultures in these worlds. Very soon the Europeans arrived, of course, and they stepped off with all their Victorian ideals. At times it looked as if we didn't have much in common. And of course there was the stoicism of the early settlers in all their forms, the tough survivors, all those wonderful things that you have in your history books and in your stories on your walls in your museums. But there was this cleanliness and godliness that came from Britain. Of course, the missionaries, we preached all these wonderful ideals, etc., to create what was called a better England. And so when I was a child, English daffodil poetry by Wordsworth was what I learnt at school. I didn't know anything about things Maori, even though I have Lebanese and Maori descent on my mother's side. So we knew about English daffodils, and we knew it, but we knew nothing about Pahutakawa or many other things to do with New Zealand. That was my birthright when I arrived. Once we're warriors, of course, we have moved on and things have changed, but we have been mining the land for a long time, and it's a symbol of an extractive economy, sadly. And so when the going gets tough, the first thing we do is we do more of the same with a vengeance. There's a meat industry report out today which says, just let's merge more wheat works, right? It won't make any difference in terms of transforming that business. So when you walk around and you see the volumes of amazing product that sits on our wharves as commodities and we export to the world, our economy is inextricably linked to foreign exchange earnings. The question is, what's it got to do with you? I'm putting to you that it's got a great deal to do with you, in the sense that many of our products we sell far too cheaply because they lack romance, they lack regionality, they lack provincial values, they lack style in all its forms, etc. And so whenever the going gets tough, we're obsessed with process improvement as opposed to product improvement.